I'm going to ask you if you would your Bibles to the book of Jeremiah chapter 10. All right, are we on now? Jeremiah chapter 10, if you'd open there right quick. I really love being in your church. I love being around your pastor. I've enjoyed the services today, enjoyed the special. And that was the politest way anybody's ever told me I'm old. But I enjoyed the special. Thank you so much for that. I'd love to see the young people involved in the singing and so forth. You notice it took two men to fulfill all the ugly. It only took one girl to fulfill all the pretty. But the two fellas did a better job. All right. Jeremiah chapter 10. We're just going to read one verse tonight. Jeremiah chapter 10. And if you would look at verse 23. Jeremiah 10:23 says, O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps. Notice those two phrases. The way of man is not in himself. It is not in man to direct his steps. If I could somehow get you to the very center of a desert, a large desert, with no mountains around the perimeter, no trees around the perimeter, and I could somehow get you there at exactly 12 noon and put you in the middle of that desert, you'd have no idea which way to go. Right. It's not in man to direct his own steps. Right. If I could somehow get you to the middle of the ocean, right, so far out in the middle you can't see any land, on an overcast night where there's no stars, you'd have no idea which way to go. Right. It's not in man to direct his own steps. You know, we're not like the geese that can fly all the way from Canada, all the way to Mexico, and all the way back, and they don't even have a GPS. In fact, they don't even have one of the old, remember the old Rand McNally road atlases? You remember flipping the pages, you know, but we're not like them. There were some scientists in White Cloud, St. Cloud, was it St. Cloud? Let me look at my notes right quick. St. Cloud, Minnesota. And they were experimenting with some wolves. And so they went to a wolf's den, a den of wolves, and they captured some of them and they put a tracking device on them. And those wolves left that den and they went east until they got just about to Green Bay, Wisconsin. And then they turned south, sort of southwest, until they got just about to the Illinois border. And then they turned northwest, and exactly 52 weeks after they left that den, after having traveled 2,600 miles, they came back to the very same dens they had left a year before. It's not in man to do that. I grew up in Louisiana. I've mentioned that many times when I've been here. I grew up out in the country. I had two brothers. I'm the middle of the three. And my father treated all three of us boys exactly the same in many ways. And one of the ways he did that was in how he taught us to hunt. When each boy was 4 years old, he would start taking us hunting. And he would let us walk behind him while he walked through the woods. Our job was to stay right behind him, 4 years of age. If he saw something running, he'd shoot it. If he saw something sitting or standing still, he would get down on one knee. He would let the 4-year-old son stand in front of him, and my back would be against my dad's chest, and he would wrap his arms around me. He had a little 20-gauge pump Winchester shotgun, and he would hold that shotgun up to his shoulder, but he would let me, or my brother, whichever one of us, he'd let me put my eye down and aim the shotgun and pull the trigger and shoot at the rabbit or the squirrel or whatever was sitting still. When we were 5 years of age, he did the exact same thing, except When we were 5 years of age, when he put his arms around us and held the shotgun, he let us put the shotgun on our shoulder, but he was holding it with us, you know. It was a little light 20 gauge shotgun. When we were 6 years of age, all three of us, exact same thing. He had a 410 bolt action youth model Stevens 410 shotgun, and he would let us carry that shotgun in the woods behind him. And we would, if we could, he always said, if you see something first, I'll let you shoot it. Well, I never saw anything first. When I was 6 years of age, he always saw it first, but still he'd let me shoot it sometimes. But we did the same thing when we were 7 years of age. We did the same thing when we were 8 years of age. And all three of us boys did the exact same thing. The year we turned 9 years of age, then for the first time we were allowed to go in the woods and hunt by ourselves, just me, my shotgun, and my dog. When I was 9 years of age, I was allowed to go out in the woods behind our house, hundreds and hundreds of acres of woods there, he allowed us to go out, and he had two rules. Rule number one was you could not take any of your buddies with you. By the time we were 9 years of age, he knew he had so well trained us that we could go in the woods by ourselves with a shotgun and get home safely. But if two boys at 9 years of age went in the woods and both of them had a shotgun, that was a whole different story. So rule number one was you couldn't take any of your buddies with you. And rule number two, he literally did this every single time. He counted out the number of shotgun shells that we were allowed to take in the woods, and you had to come home with the number of shotgun shells that you left with or enough game that added up to the number. There was none of this, well, Dad, I thought I could hit it. It was a little further away than I realized. There were no excuses. You came home with 5 shotgun shells or 4 shotgun shells and 1 squirrel, or 3 shotgun shells and 2 rabbits. I mean, he did the math every single time. That's the way he trained us. And by the time we were 9 years of age, we were allowed to hunt by ourselves. I spent all of my childhood, much of my teen years, and even a great deal of my early adult life, fishing, hunting, hiking, trail riding, horseback riding, camping, frog gigging, whitewater rafting, and then after I moved up north, snowmobiling and four-wheeling and so forth. At one time or another, I've either trapped or hunted fox, squirrels, rabbits, coons, quail, dove, ducks, geese, pheasant, deer, elk, wild boar. And we hunted wild boar a little different than some folks did. My older brother was a guide for hunting wild boar. And the way they didn't sit in a deer stand and shoot a hog when it walked by. The way they hunted them and the way he hunts them and the way we hunted them, he usually had some customers there with him, and he would take his what he called bay dogs out, 6 or 8 or 10 dogs, and they would chase the wild boar through the woods until they bayed it up, and they get him surrounded. And then he had 2 pit bulls, and he'd turn the pit bulls loose, and they would go in and take the hog down. One would get him by the jaw or the ear or something. The other would get him by the back leg, and they'd stretch him out, the 2 pit bulls would. And then the customer had a big knife about this long that my brother would give to him, and the customer would go in and stab the wild boar. That's the way we hunted the wild boar. I've hunted bear, not with a knife, but I've hunted bear. I've hunted coyotes, cougars, water moccasins, rattlesnakes, gators. By the time I was 9 years of age, I was allowed to leave the house in the morning before daylight, walk out when it was pitch black dark, and stay gone all day long and come home after dark at night. I don't know how many nights I walked through Mr. Bozeman's woods, up across Mr. Sykes' pasture, down through our pasture, up by the barn to the house. I mean, it's pitch black dark, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. By the time I was 12 years of age, all 3 of us, same thing, he did the same thing for all of us. By the time I was 12 years of age, I was allowed to spend all night in the woods, put out some trot lines or some set hooks or go coon hunting or whatever we were doing at that particular time of the year. And then I could take a buddy with me. In fact, I had to. They never allowed me to stay out all night by myself at that age. But by the time I was a teenager, in my middle teen years, then I was allowed to go into the swamps or down the bayou or to the cabin that we had and so forth. And I stayed gone sometimes as long as 3 days and 3 nights, never see another human being the whole time I was there. My hunting and fishing has taken me throughout and into Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Montana, Idaho, Washington State, Wyoming, Colorado, California, South Dakota, Iowa, Arizona, Oregon, Alaska, Alberta, Ontario, Manitoba, Canada. I've been on more creeks, rivers, streams, bayous, lakes, gulfs, bays, oceans than I could list. Multiple times I've been in the Ozark Mountains, the Smoky Mountains, and I'm going somewhere with this. Now just stay with me. I'm getting pretty close. I've been in the Blue Mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Cumberland Mountains, Rocky Mountains, Cascade Mountains, Bitterroot Mountains, Bighorn Mountains. I've been in the Ouachita National Forest, the Ozark National Forest, Pikes Peak National Park, Grand Mesa National Forest, Rocky Mountain National Park, Florida Keys, the Ottawa National Forest, the Glacier National Park, the Flathead National Forest. I think they named that one after Andrew. Grand Canyon National Park, the Mount Hood National Forest, Black Hills National Forest, Badlands National Park. I'm almost there. Just stay with me just another moment. Smoky Mountains National Park, Cherokee National Forest, Mount St. Helens National Park, Olympic National Park, Yellowstone National Park, Grand Teton National Forest, the Chippewa National Forest, the King Ranch in Texas, the Terra Nova National Park in Newfoundland, Canada, the international boundary waters, the Shoshone National Forest, and all over the Kenai Peninsula. And here's why I said all that, to make this one statement. I have never one time in my life for 10 seconds ever been lost when I was in the woods. Not one time. I've never spent 10 seconds in the woods or on a lake or a bayou or wherever wondering, where am I? How did I get here? Where do I go next? How do I get back from where I started? Not one time. You say, well, but the Bible says the way of man is not in himself, and it is not in man to direct his steps. Then how could you hunt, fish, hike, horseback ride, canoe, camp, whitewater rafting, four-wheeling, wave running, snowmobiling, kayaking, day and night for up to 7 days at a time and never be lost? Here's how. By the time I was 9 years of age, my father had taught me to use, now he never used this phrase, this is a phrase I made up, but he taught me to use what I call reference points. He taught me, if you go into the woods that you've never been in before, find a fence row and follow that fence row into the woods and never get out of sight of that fence row. And when it's time to come back, you just turn around and follow the same fence row back out. Or follow the creek upstream and never let that creek get out of your sight. And when it's time to come back out of the new woods you've never been in before, follow that same creek back out. I remember many nights when we were coon hunting. The bayous, they don't flow like a creek. They meander, just barely move. And I remember nights coon hunting and crossing the bayou and crossing the bayou and crossing back over and crossing back over, and the bayous meandering through the woods. And we'd have to, we would still know where the bayou was, but we wouldn't know which way it was flowing. We'd take an acorn and throw it in the water and stand there and wait a few minutes and see which way it started drifting, so we'd know, okay, we came in this way, we got to go out that way. The way of man is not in himself. It is not in man to direct his steps. So he taught me to pick a shoreline or a game trail or a pipeline or a high line or a valley or even a mountain peak or even the sun, according to what time of the day it was, or even the moon at night. I don't know if you know, but the moon, just like the sun, comes up in the east and sets in the west. But the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. How does God order my steps if it's not in man to direct his steps? God gave me some reference points. Just like my dad taught me to follow my reference points. He never used that phrase, but just like he taught me to follow what I call my reference points, God gives me and you some reference points. Isn't it wonderful that God did not just drop us down here on this earth and say, good luck? Isn't it wonderful that God didn't just say to Adam and Eve, now replenish the earth and good luck? No, God gave us some great guidelines. And the best one that I know of, I'm holding in my hand right now. This is the best reference point I know of. This reference point right here. If you'll keep this reference point in sight. And by the way, when I say keep it in sight, you know what I mean by that. I mean always believe it. I mean read it often. I mean memorize it. I mean study it. I mean learn to live by it. But I also mean it doesn't hurt to keep one pretty close by most of the time. You know, I rarely ever get into a situation where I couldn't get to a Bible within a few moments. You know, it's a good idea to keep it just close to you. The Bible says the law of his God is in his heart. None of his steps shall slide. The Bible says, order my steps in thy word. The Bible says the word, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. The Bible says, make me to go in the path of thy commandments. This is the best one I know of. Then can I tell you of another one, especially for you young people? Your parents. That's a great view. That's a great reference point. Your parents. The Bible tells us very clearly that we're to follow our parents. Solomon said to his son, my son, hear the commandments of thy father and forsake not the law of thy mother. He said also, my son, keep thy father's commandments and forsake not the law of thy mother. He said, my son, give me thine heart and let thine eyes observe my ways. I tell you a third one. There's many. There's more than I can number, but I'm just pointing out to me some of the major ones. This book, of course, nothing else compares. This book is the best reference point. But your parents is a good reference point. Our pastor is a good reference point. You know, the Bible says that I will give you pastors according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. Every single one of us in this room tonight knows something about God and knows something about this book and knows something about life that we wouldn't know if our pastor hadn't taught us. Every single one of us in this room tonight, we know, we understand something about the Bible that we wouldn't understand. We understand something about God that we wouldn't understand. We understand some things about life that we wouldn't understand if our pastor hadn't taught us. And I know that there's a movement that says, well, I can just take the Bible and get off out by myself and learn it by myself. Well, the only problem with that is the people who think they can do that also think they're smarter than God. Because God said, I'll give you a pastor that'll teach you some things. It'll give you some knowledge. It'll give you some understanding. And if I was able to get my own knowledge, all that I needed, and my own understanding, all that I needed, then why did God waste time giving us a pastor? Why did he waste somebody's life calling him to be a pastor? I'm telling you tonight, this book right here is the best reference point. Parents are a very good reference point. Your pastor is a good reference point. Another good reference point is your teachers, your Sunday school teachers, and other teachers, especially like in a Christian school or something. The Bible says that he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints. And another good reference point that God gives us is books that have been written by good godly people. And then another reference point he gives us, and I'm just listing several quickly here, and you'll see why in a minute. He gives us examples of those who went before us. You know, the Bible talks about that those who lived in the Old Testament, those in the New Testament said, those who lived in the Old Testament did so for examples for us. You know why it's important that you read the Bible? You know why it's important that you study what they did in the Old Testament? You know why it's important that you know what those old people did way back then? It's because those are examples for me and you to know what to do. How many times do we face some situation in life and wonder, man, what should I do here? And many, many, many times there's somebody who went before us that's a good example. That's why we ought to learn good American history. That's why we ought to learn good world history. And I mean literal history, not the so-called rewriting of history that they're doing nowadays. And by the way, you can't rewrite history. All you can do is tell a lie. You either tell the truth or you tell a lie. There's no such thing as rewriting history. But rewriting history doesn't sound quite as offensive as I'm lying to you right now. But we should follow those who went before us. Can I give you this little hint? If you can get 2 or 3 or 4 of your reference points to all agree, boy, then you're real safe. Then you really, you can be confident you're right on the mark. I remember only one time in my adult life did my father and my 2 brothers and I, all 4 of us, got to go on a hunting trip together. One time after we all grew up, moved away from home, one time we were able to get back together. I was preaching in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and my 2 brothers and my father drove out to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and they met me in Cheyenne, Wyoming on a Sunday, and I preached all day, and they came to the services. And then after the service Sunday night, we got in a truck, and we drove from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Jackson, Wyoming. About, I don't remember, 10 hours or so. I don't remember, but I know we drove all night. I remember that. And we got there a little before daylight on Monday morning. And when we got there, some other men had gotten there before us and set up a camp. And they had some horses waiting for us to ride those horses to go elk hunting in the Grand Teton National Forest. And I remember that morning before daylight, none of us had ever been there before. We got on those horses, and we started out of camp, and we were riding up the right-hand side of a river that was flowing this way. We were going this way. And sometime that morning, about daylight or so, we left the river and started up the side of the mountain. But as we were going up the side of the mountain, you could still see the river down there on our left. And off in the distance, you could see the 2 Grand Tetons, the big mountain peaks sticking up over there. You could see them off to our left. All morning as we made our way up that mountain, you could see them there. Now, none of us had ever been there before, and about 1 o'clock that afternoon, I remember my dad saying, "Boys, I think it's about time we head back to the camp." And I remember thinking, oh, the camp. Yeah, that place we were this morning before daylight. That place I've never been before in my life. But you know what happened? We turned those horses around that we had been riding up the mountain all morning, and we started riding down the mountain. And those Grand Tetons that had been our left all morning, now they were on our right. And that river that had been on our left all morning, now it was on our right. We had gone upstream, now we went downstream. And guess what? The amazing thing happened. A little after dark that night, we wound up back at the same camp where we started that morning. If you can get your reference points to match up, boy, then you're really doing good. Hey, if this book and your pastor match up, boy, you're really doing good then. And you know, there are places in America where that doesn't happen. There are places in America where the pastor and the book don't have anything to do with each other. I don't know if they ever met or not, you know. But if your pastor and this book agree, you're doing really good. Hey, I tell you what, you can hardly go wrong if your pastor and that book and your parents all match up. If they're all doing the same thing, if they're all headed in the same direction. Hey, I tell you another one. If that pastor and that book and your parents and your Sunday school teacher all seem to be heading in the right direction, what in the world are you doing off wandering around out there in the dark trying to find your own way? Why in the world are you trying to blaze a new trail so you can be the first one to get lost and somebody has to come rescue you? I tell you why you're nervous. I tell you why you have a lack of confidence. I'll tell you why you're worried. I tell you why you have sometimes a lack of faith. It's because you have no reference points. You're just bouncing around like a marble in a pinball machine. You younger people don't know what that is. But us older people that love God, we know what that is. But you're just bouncing around. You don't know where you're headed. You have no reference points. You know, who your pastor is more important than who your boss is. Hey, can I tell you, which church you attend is more important than which house you live in? Can I tell you this? How much truth you're learning is more important than how much salary you're earning. Can I remind you of this? Your children's Sunday school teacher is just as important, and in most cases more important, than who their school teacher is. You know, a college that'll help you prepare to be the right kind of spouse is more important than a college that will only teach you how to live a career. Where you go soul winning is more important than where you go deer. Well, I don't know about that one. Let's move on to the next one. But anyway, the standards and the convictions which your family dresses by is more important than what brands and what fashions they wear. When I was in the 7th grade, that fall, when I went into the 7th grade, for the first time ever, my dad finally said, "Son, you and I are going to go hunting this Saturday. Would you like to bring one of your buddies with you?" And I thought, man, would I? That'd be great. I'd love to do that. And immediately I knew exactly who I was going to bring. I was going to bring Tim Jamar. He was my best buddy. For the last 3 years, literally, every other Friday night, at least during the school year, and sometimes even in the summer, every other Friday night, during the 4th grade, the 5th grade, and the 6th grade, I went to Tim Jamar's house, and we went across the highway, or the country road, down through Mr. Carter's pasture, down past the pond, down past the bayou, and into the swampy area back there, and we played all morning on Saturday morning. Tim and I did every other Saturday morning. Every other Saturday morning, every other Friday night, Tim came to my house. And we went behind my house in the woods and down through Mr. Sykes' pasture into Mr. Bozeman's woods and down past the creek. And he had a couple of ponds back there. And we'd play in the woods all morning on Saturday morning. Well, Tim and I had been in the woods together every week for 3 years. And I thought, who else would I bring? I'd bring Tim Jamar. So my dad and I went to Tim Jamar's house. We parked our truck in his front yard. Tim came out of the house with his shotgun. We walked across the road, down through Mr. Carter's pasture, and down into the woods, and we went to what we called a pin oak flat. You ever heard of that term, a pin oak? A pin oak is a certain type of oak tree, and a pin oak, it creates a dense, canopy, and not much sunlight can get through, and so very little grows underneath it, and so it's usually open under there. And so we went down to the Pin Oak Flat down by the bayou, and my dad said to Tim, you sit down right here. It was a little bit before daylight. He said, you sit down right here, and there's a big pin oak tree there. And he said, there's no underbrush between you and the tree, and when the squirrels come out about daylight, you'll see them, and you can shoot one. And he said, I'm going to take Ray right over there and put him under another den tree. A den tree is where squirrels live inside the tree. And he said, I'll take Ray over there. And he said, now I'm going to go over there and hunt. And so Dad dropped Tim off, dropped me off. He went over to where he was going to hunt. And about 15 minutes later, the sky was just beginning to have a little bit of that gray tint to it where you could begin to see the outline of the tree limbs if you looked up. Still dark, but and all of a sudden, I heard, help! 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 Boom! 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 Help! Boom! 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 I thought, man, what in the world? I didn't know if a gator had come up out of the bayou. I didn't know if one of the black panthers we had in that area had come by. And boy, my dad was like an Indian going through the woods. Man, he was quiet. He could walk through the woods. You wouldn't hear. And I mean, he could walk right up on a deer and almost pet the thing. Not literally, but I mean, he was. But that morning, all of a sudden, I heard crash, bang, crash, limbs breaking. I knew my dad was running through the woods to see what was wrong with Tim, and I thought, man, I better go see what's happening. And I got up and I started that way. And when I came into that pin oak flat, that open area underneath the canopy of the pin oaks, I could see my dad and Tim standing, about as far as from here to that door over there, just barely beginning to get a little daylight. And Tim was red in the face. He was perspiring. His gun was in his hand like this, and he was shaking like this. And my dad had his arm around Tim, and he was saying, you're okay. Everything's fine. We're all okay. Everybody's going to be okay. He said, now, Tim, you couldn't see Ray, but he was right over there just a few feet away from you. And Tim, you couldn't see me, but I could see you the whole time. And I was right over there. You're going to be fine. Just calm down. And so Tim did calm down, and we did hunt the rest of the morning. At about noon, we went back to Tim's house, dropped him off. We got in the truck, and I couldn't wait. I mean, before Dad could get it in reverse, I said, Dad, what in the world happened to Tim this morning? And he said, son, that was the first time in Tim's life he had ever been in the woods where he couldn't see another human being. And I remember looking at him and thinking, so what? I've been doing that since I was in the 4th grade. And I guess Dad could tell what I was thinking because he said, son, you got to remember, when Tim was an infant, still in the crib, his father died. And nobody ever taught him what I taught you about what I call reference points in the woods. I feel as comfortable in the woods as some of you ladies do in your kitchen. Take me to any woods anywhere in the world. Now, I may not go as deep into them as you would want me to, but as long as I can find my reference point, I feel as comfortable as you do in your kitchen. And the reason we sometimes live life like this, because we don't know where we're going. We don't have any reference points. We can't figure out where we are, much less where to go. And we can't figure out how to get back where we came from. But if you just get some reference points and stick with them. In this book right here, the old King James Bible, best reference point in the whole world. This church is a good reference point. That pastor is a good reference point. The Sunday school teachers are a good reference point. The junior church preachers are good reference points. Your parents, especially your parents, period. But especially if your parents are Christians. And especially if your parents go to church. And especially if your parents believe this book. You just get some reference points and get some that line up and match each other. And it can transform your whole emotional being. Father, I pray tonight you'll help all of us to take this, I guess you'd call it a very simple truth, just a couple of stories about a